Winter Storm Sage tracking some moderately heavy snow across parts of the upper Midwest. It'll start to get a bit windy there as well, and eventually this is all headed to the northeast. We're going to be timing out and looking at the potential of maybe one of the most impactful storms of the season, particularly for parts of New England. Welcome to our special coverage of Winter Storm Sage. I'm meteorologist Jeff Morrow.
And I'm storm specialist Carl Parker. We're looking at a blockbuster of a storm, 24 million people under winter alerts. And as the storm moves into the northeast, it is going to strengthen into a very powerful area of low pressure with multiple impacts. We're talking about heavy rain, heavy snow, gusty wind, coastal flooding, all of that on the table. And let's first take a look at what's happening with the storm right now in the Midwest. Here's Jeff.
All right, we're still kind of in the formative stages, if you will, in the upper Midwest here. You're looking at the snow we're expecting still to fall here from Wisconsin right on over into parts of lower Michigan. Even parts of upper Michigan can still get a little bit more snow, although I think the bulk of the heavier snow is over for you. Generally in the range of 3 to 5 inches, anywhere from Green Bay over to Grand Rapids. Other areas of lower Michigan may be on the order of about 1 to 3. The energy is actually right here on our water vapor imagery. You can kind of see a bit of a swirl there that will continue to pull to the east and to the southeast with time. And there you can see it. There's pretty easily to pick out the rotation around our low pressure area right here. And this is our heavier snow right around Green Bay still. So I wouldn't be surprised if Green Bay ends up with, well, anywhere between 6 to 8 or even 9 inches of snow. We've had a report of 9 inches in Iola, which is just to the northwest of Green Bay, and also up on the Upper Peninsula near Marquette, about 3.5 inches of snow. And it's still snowing lightly up around the Marquette vicinity, but the heavier snow right now from near Green Bay, and it may be here for another few hours. So we could overachieve, if you will, in this area and maybe pick up another 3, 5, 6 inches on top of what you already have there around Green Bay. No surprise at all. And you're looking at road conditions here, and on our scale, if you will, at the top of the screen, that pink area, those pink roads, that's snow-covered highways, and so obviously that could be fairly slick for travel. Not so much in lower Michigan. This snow, at least for the time being, still a little bit lighter, but some spots overnight could pick up about 3 to 5 additional inches. So that's where Sage is right now. And timing it out, it looks like the snow will generally pull to the south and the east as the upper level low does. So we'll probably end things overnight in Wisconsin. Still a little bit of snow into tomorrow morning across lower Michigan. Up a little bit, but not substantially here. I think most of that will be reserved a little bit farther east when Sage really starts to wrap up and tap into some of that Atlantic moisture as we head through late Monday and definitely on to Tuesday and even Wednesday. Again, Sage will ultimately move out of the Great Lakes and kind of reform, if you will, and really pound the northeast. And that's where we'll see some of the biggest impacts for areas including Boston and Providence, which you're looking at right here. Pretty tranquil at the moment. Just kind of waiting, the calm, proverbial calm before the storm. Over the next few days, we'll see some coastal flooding, though, damaging wind gusts and snow pounding some of these areas. With the details, or at least as we see them now, here's Carl.
Yeah, Jeff, it's pretty amazing when you consider how little winter weather that we have seen in the Northeast so far this season. We're talking about a blockbuster snowstorm that is on the way here, at least for interior parts of the Northeast. Now, I want to show you in our latest snowfall forecast, and this obviously is probably going to be a little bit different when we get closer to the event, but here you see a lot of heavy snow into the Poconos and the Catskills, the Adirondacks, the Hudson Valley, the Berkshires, Central Mass, up into the Green and White Mountains as well. There's high confidence in that part of the forecast. Generally speaking, there is lower confidence in this part of the forecast that is along that 95 corridor where we go from a lot of snow to less snow. Generally, when you've got a very sharp gradient like that, where you go from a lot to a little, that's a lower confidence forecast to begin with. But you've also got, very high sun angle at this time of the year. You don't have a lot of cold air that's available for this system. The track of the low is going to be very, very important. The intensity of the low is going to be important because the low is actually going to create its own cold air. As it gets stronger, it's going to be cooling the entire column, and that's going to create its own cold air. And so we expect that there's going to be a changeover to snow from rain in those coastal areas. The low pressure getting much, much more intense between tonight and tomorrow. There you see tomorrow night getting strong off the coast there. So you've got this area of rain initially in these coastal areas, and then that's going to become snow and very strong winds on top of that with heavy wet snow blowing in combination with that heavy wet snow, and that's going to mean that some power outages will be possible. Here's a model forecast. You see this sort of elongated area of low pressure. Then it becomes a little more consolidated by the time we get into Tuesday. There we see that changeover along the 95 corridor, Boston, and into New York as well. So it's going to be really tough for the 95 corridor. That forecast is very tricky. But again, in interior parts of the Northeast, this is going to be one heck of a storm. Jeff, over to you.
Well, of course, the main artery, at least as far as travel in the Northeast, is Interstate 95, and it's often in the crosshairs of wintry weather. There's a scientific reason why that battle exists between cities along that very important route.
Interstate 95, stretching the entire eastern seaboard from Miami to the tip of Maine. This main artery keeps the East Coast running, unless we're talking about a winter storm, which can completely derail everything. With these storms, all types of precipitation pound the pavement, turning the interstate into more of a battleground boulevard for winter weather. But what causes this, and why is I-95 in the crosshairs for winter weather?
So the I-95 corridor, in the big picture, is a dividing line between the relatively warm, moist air over the Gulf Stream of the Atlantic Ocean and the colder, drier air coming out of Canada. But you also have not just land-ocean contrast, but mountainous terrain inland from the mid-Atlantic and Northeast, which just tends to focus precipitation along that I-95 corridor. And the difference between the rain and the snow could be dramatic over just a few miles in that I-95 corridor.
It's more than just a nuisance. According to the I-95 Corridor Coalition, the passageway has a $4.7 trillion economy. That's an incredible 40% of the nation's gross domestic product. And when big weather strikes, the bottom line takes a hit.
What happens when you have weather like this, the economy basically just freezes in place. So commerce doesn't happen. People aren't going to the store. They're not spending money. They're not going to restaurants. They're not traveling. It becomes like, for the Northeast, it's sort of a house of cards weekend where everybody is bundled up inside and they're not moving out, and therefore they're not spending money. So it shuts the economy down effectively for an area.
Roughly 72,000 people strap into their cars, ready to duel it out on I-95 every single day. But each battle is different when it comes to winter weather.
And you're going to get precipitation. The question is, somewhere near that I-95 corridor, who's going to get rain? Who's going to get snow?
Always seems to happen that way. Well, Sage will keep snowplow drivers busy clearing more snow in parts of upstate New York. This is a look at a scene from Winter Storm Ricardo yesterday, just outside of Rochester. Storms have dropped more than a foot of snow in this area just over this past month, and that's about 5 inches above average. One of the few times we've seen above average snow in any area of the Northeast, it seems like.
Yeah, and here's a look at the snow coming down in Rochester on Friday. Ricardo dropping more than 6 inches of snow on that day. Winter Storm Sage will keep things pretty snowy through at least the middle part of the week. And let's talk a little bit more about how this is likely to unfold. And first of all, into upstate New York, we expect that it's going to be pretty active. We're talking about snow totals that could be well over a foot, maybe a couple of feet in the highest of elevations. And so for those of you who've been disappointed in ski season so far, this is going to be the one.
Yeah, let's hope that it's a little powdery at the higher elevations.
Yes.
A little harder to ski in the wet snow.
In the mud, yeah.
Yeah. Gusty winds will also be a huge problem here, and that could cause some coastal flooding as well.
Absolutely, and heavy rain is going to be a real issue. That's going to also change over to snow along that 95 corridor, which is why the forecast is so tough along the 95 corridor.
All right, let's start our tour here in the upper parts of New York State. And definitely there's a big change between Buffalo Buffalo and Syracuse more to the east.
Absolutely. And, Buffalo has gotten absolutely clobbered by snow this year, but it's one of the few spots in the Northeast that's seen a lot of snow. The rest of the Northeast, for the most part, has not.
That's right. So if you're just south of Syracuse over toward Rome, New York, maybe upwards of a foot or even a little bit more than that. Now, the snow you're looking at here really isn't amounting to too much, and this really isn't when Sage is going to get its act together here. We're going to time it out here for you. So tonight's snow, yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned about that. More of a nuisance than anything. And it may actually mix in with a little bit of rain during the latter part of the day. But then Monday night into Tuesday, that's when things get cranking here.
Absolutely. And we also want to show you what's going to happen farther downstate, down into New York City. And this is where the forecast is really tricky, because we're going to be looking at a very difficult forecast because of this gradient. You see where we go from a lower amount of snow around the city, but then not very far to the north, you get into a much heavier regime here. And, that necessarily, when you've got that kind of a gradient, that means a lower confidence forecast. And, what exactly happens here in New York is just going to be a little too tough to say right now. We'll probably have a better idea tomorrow, but it's a very hard forecast.
Yeah, so this is one model. This is the European model. Gives New York City itself a couple inches of snow, whereas the GFS says no, nada, nothing.
Yeah.
So again, you can see where we're pulling our hair out here a little bit. What we are confident of is that we'll probably, in fact, we will start as some rain here, but then on the backside, as we head on into Monday night and into the day Tuesday, it starts to mix over, and could it bring us a little bit of accumulating snow? That's where it gets iffy.
Very tough, no question about that. And speaking of tough forecasts, when we go farther northeast, so actually we're going to go to Philly first, aren't we? And see what's going on.
Actually, over here to Hartford and Providence.
Okay, we are going up here. So, here too, same story. You've got this gradient, and you've got a big change. Look at that into western parts of Massachusetts, around the Berkshires there. Talking about possibly a couple of feet of snow. Amazing snowstorm for those interior areas.
So the Mass Pike, not the best drive as we head from Monday night into Tuesday, I'm afraid.
The pines are getting shredded.
All right, all is quiet now in southwest Arkansas, but not before some storms tore through a few communities there, bringing down trees and dropping some heavy rain and some hail, as you can hear. More storms are pushing across parts of the deep south right now, but the tornado watch that had been out, well, that has expired. And, well, let's go to Carl to see if we have any warnings right now. Carl?
So we do not have any warnings right now. We're looking at some stronger storms, some heavy rain here coming across the north central part of the state. Right now you see that terrain just south of Lake City and across the 75 corridor as well, putting some of the lightning on there. You see that there are some noisy storms now just south of Lake City. There is some potential for some severe weather here, but again, the watch has been dropped and we don't think it's real high. Let's take a look at the model forecast and show you where we go from here. Now, a lot of these same areas are going to be looking at more rain, more thunder through the night tonight. There we go into 10 o'clock tonight. We've still got a lot going on along the I-10 corridor, even into the overnight hours. Stronger storms rolling into Jacksonville, coming across I-10, across 75. And then tomorrow morning, some more storms in that I-10 corridor. And then this area is going to be sagging southward going through the day tomorrow. So there's going to be some potential for some severe weather into parts of Florida, maybe some gusty wind initially in the northern part of the state and then sagging down into the southern part of the state. Here's the model forecast showing you how that plays out. And you see this area of storms moving farther and farther south into Orlando and then down to the southwest part of the state as we get into tomorrow evening. So not a real high severe threat, but again, some gusty wind with some of these storms. Jeff, over to you.
All right, something that we haven't talked a lot about is the cold air that's going to come in behind Sage and get drawn fairly far to the south. In fact, as we head through the next several mornings, it goes from 96 million people that will have temperatures below freezing to 129, that by Wednesday morning, about 131 million people will be below that freezing mark. So if you thought we were done with the cold weather, particularly in the deep south, well, Unfortunately, this can happen. You get everything blooming, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. And then you get the cold air coming in. And this is by Wednesday morning. Look at that in Nashville, 26 degrees, Atlanta 32, Raleigh at 31. And there's a lot of trees that are already leafing at the present time, and that could lead to some damage. There are freeze watches out where you see this light pink shading here from parts of central North Carolina back across Georgia, northern Alabama, northern Mississippi into Tennessee. And there's also some freeze warnings already out here for northern parts of Arkansas and northwest areas of Tennessee. This is where the leaves have already started to come out. So you can see it's a pretty wide area, and particularly the northern parts of this area from the Ohio Valley into the Tennessee Valley and parts of the deep south. Maybe some damage here, particularly Wednesday morning, because that's when the air may be coldest. In Atlanta, we're thinking that it could be Tuesday morning, but I can guarantee you the northern suburbs of Atlanta will be colder than that. We'll probably be in the 20s. And look at Nashville, Wednesday morning, down into the mid-20s. That, folks, could be a hard freeze there and could do some significant damage. So cover the tender vegetation if you can outside your house. Well, the impending nor'easter, that's not the only big storm that we're closely watching. We go to the west coast, an atmospheric river. Although it's already flooded parts of the west coast, including California, this is on top of weeks of heavy rain and snow that dominated the area. We'll be checking in on conditions there right now and what's to come. That's coming up later this hour. First, let's take a look at a few cities we're watching tonight. This is Duluth, Minnesota, kind of on the back edge of Sage right now. Still a little bit of leftover snow. And Eau Claire, Wisconsin, again, a winter weather advisory.
This program presented by Kia. Going farther for all with the all-new Kia Niro EV.
Welcome home, Commander.